My beloved child, do not rush past this moment. There is a reason your eyes stopped here when they could have wandered anywhere else. Out of countless voices competing for your attention, something gentle yet unmistakably powerful guided you here. You may believe it was coincidence, but heaven rarely speaks through accidents. It whispers through timing, through longing, through moments that awaken something deep inside your spirit before your mind understands why. Listen carefully, because what you are about to hear is part of a fictional inspirational message, yet it is written to feel as though heaven itself is unfolding a mystery before your eyes. Let your heart receive the story, not as a prediction, but as a journey of hope, restoration, and divine purpose. There is someone whose footsteps have been circling the edge of your life far longer than you realize. You have felt it before. Not as certainty. Not as proof. But as those quiet moments when your heart suddenly became still without explanation, when a familiar song played at exactly the right time, when a memory arrived without invitation, when you wondered why one particular soul continued appearing inside your thoughts even after you convinced yourself to move forward. You dismissed those moments. You told yourself they meant nothing. Yet heaven noticed every one of them. Pause for just another moment. Because something much larger is beginning to unfold. There is a journey that has already begun. Not in your imagination. Not inside your wishes. Inside someone else's heart. While you have questioned whether you mattered, while you wondered whether your silence had become permanent, while you secretly asked if you should stop believing that unfinished stories could ever find their ending. Another heart has been wrestling with questions almost identical to yours. They have spoken your name only in whispers. They have replayed old conversations until sunrise. They have wondered whether reaching toward you would heal everything, or destroy the fragile hope they have managed to protect. Every day became a debate. Should I go? Should I stay? What if I'm too late? What if they no longer want to see me? These questions echoed louder than anyone around them could hear. No crowd noticed. No friend understood. But heaven heard every silent conversation. That is why today feels different. Because something changed. Not suddenly. Not dramatically. Quietly. The kind of quiet decision that alters the direction of an entire life before anyone else notices. Imagine standing before two roads. One leads toward comfort. The other toward vulnerability. One protects your pride. The other risks your heart. Most people choose comfort. Very few choose courage. Your story begins changing the moment someone chooses courage over certainty. Yet courage does not erase fear. That is the mystery unfolding now. The heart connected to yours finally gathered enough strength to make a decision they never believed possible. But even after making that decision, fear refused to let go. That is why heaven has not revealed the entire picture at once. Because every great restoration begins long before the reunion itself. It begins inside the invisible battles nobody applauds. While the world celebrated ordinary mornings, someone sat quietly staring at a screen filled with destinations. Not because traveling seemed exciting. Because every destination reminded them of one place. The place where you are. Their hands hovered. Their breathing slowed. They almost closed the page. They almost convinced themselves this was foolish. Then another memory returned. A smile. A laugh. A promise that was never fully spoken. Something inside whispered. What if this is your last chance? Those words echoed louder than logic. Louder than fear. Louder than every excuse they had rehearsed for months. So they stayed. They kept looking. They kept imagining. What would happen if your eyes met again? Would there be silence? Would there be forgiveness? Would there be joy? Or would there simply be tears too honest for language? Even heaven remained silent for a moment. Because some choices become sacred the instant they are made. Then, one small movement changed everything. A confirmation appeared. Not because every problem had disappeared. Not because every fear had vanished. But because hope finally outweighed hesitation. And from that moment forward, nothing inside them remained exactly the same. Yet here is the secret few people understand. Buying the ticket was never the hardest part. The hardest part came afterward. The moment reality whispered. What happens if they don't want to see you? That single question has followed them like a shadow. Every hour. Every quiet room. Every sleepless night. Fear is strange, my beloved child. It can convince a person to prepare for a miracle while simultaneously believing they do not deserve one. It tells them to move forward. Then begs them to turn around. That is the invisible storm taking place now. The world would call it anxiety. Heaven calls it the final battle between love and self-doubt. And battles like these rarely happen where anyone else can witness them. No applause. No audience. Only one trembling heart trying to believe that grace is stronger than regret. You may wonder why this fictional story speaks so deeply to the soul. Perhaps it is because every human heart recognizes the feeling of standing one step away from vulnerability. Everyone has faced the doorway where fear says, stay. But hope whispers, take one more step. That whisper has become impossible for them to ignore. Still, there is something they have not told anyone. Not their closest friend. Not their family. Not even themselves completely. Because admitting it aloud would make everything real. And once something becomes real, it can also break. That possibility terrifies them. So they smile when others are watching. They continue ordinary conversations. They pretend everything is normal. Yet every ordinary moment secretly circles back to one extraordinary question. What if seeing you changes everything? They cannot answer it. Neither can heaven. Not yet. Because some answers only arrive after two journeys finally meet. One journey belongs to the traveler. The other belongs to the one waiting without realizing the road has already begun leading someone home. What neither heart fully understands is this. The greatest miracles often begin quietly. Not with thunder. Not with spectacle. But with one trembling decision that seems almost too small to matter. That is how restoration has always entered human history. One prayer. One step. One forgiven memory. One courageous heartbeat. One ticket. And yet, even after that choice, something happened that neither heart could have predicted. A single unexpected moment caused them to question whether they should disappear once again instead of coming closer. That moment is the turning point of this story. And it changes everything. The moment that changed everything did not arrive with thunder. It arrived through a message. A few words appeared on their screen, ordinary enough to anyone else, yet powerful enough to make their hearts stop for a breath. They had already bought the ticket. They had already imagined the journey 100 times. They had already pictured the road leading them closer to you. But just when courage had begun to feel real, those words awakened the very fear they had been trying to silence. They read the message once. Then again. Then a third time, hoping its meaning would somehow change. It did not. The message came from someone who knew part of your story, but not your entire heart. Someone who believed they were protecting both of you from disappointment. There was no cruelty in their words. There was no deliberate attempt to destroy what was beginning. Yet what they said touched the most vulnerable place inside your soulmate. They wrote, "Are you certain they still feel the same way?" That question entered like a whisper but expanded like an echo. Your soulmate stared at those words until the room around them seemed to disappear. Suddenly, every fear they had buried beneath courage returned at once. The unanswered conversations. The distance. The time that had passed. The moments when they had wanted to speak but remained silent. The occasions when pride stood where honesty should have stood. The possibility that you had finally healed from the confusion they had caused. Do not look away now, because this is where the hidden battle becomes deeper. Your soulmate did not buy that ticket because they were certain of your response. They bought it because they were no longer able to live peacefully with the thought of never trying. That decision was not made from confidence. It was made from longing. It came from the realization that losing you without making one honest effort would hurt far more than receiving an answer they feared. But when that message appeared, courage began slipping through their fingers. They opened the booking confirmation. Their name was there. The date was there. The destination was there. Everything had become real. They placed their finger near the option to cancel. For several seconds, they did not move. They could almost hear two voices battling inside them. One said, "Protect yourself. Do not risk this." The other whispered, "You did not come this far to run again." Their breathing became uneven. They stood up, walked across the room, and returned to the screen. The confirmation remained unchanged, silently waiting for their decision. That ticket had become more than permission to travel. It had become a mirror showing them exactly how much fear still ruled their choices. The strange truth is that they were not afraid of the journey itself. They were afraid of the moment after arriving. They imagined stepping into a place where every sound felt unfamiliar, yet everything reminded them of you. They imagined checking their phone repeatedly, wondering whether to tell you they were near. They imagined writing a message, deleting it, writing another, and deleting that one too. They imagined seeing you. That was the thought that broke through every defense. Because in their imagination, you did not appear angry. You appeared calm. And somehow, your calmness frightened them more than anger could have. Anger would prove that something remained alive between you. Anger would mean the story still carried emotion. But calmness could mean acceptance. It could mean you had found peace without them. It could mean they were returning to a door that no longer belonged to their future. Stay until the end, because the next truth is not what it seems. The person who sent that message did not know that your soulmate had been gathering signs of hope for weeks. They had noticed small things that seemed insignificant to everyone else. A familiar song appearing when they were thinking of you. A place connected to an old memory suddenly showing up in conversation. Your name appearing in unexpected ways. A dream so vivid that they woke with tears on their face. They did not treat these moments as proof. But each one quietly challenged the belief that the connection was completely over. Then came the strongest moment of all. Several nights before purchasing the ticket, your soulmate had dreamed that they were standing in a crowded place. People moved in every direction, yet every face seemed blurred. They called your name once, but there was no answer. They called again, louder this time, and still heard nothing. Just as they were about to leave, a hand touched their shoulder. They turned. You were standing there. You did not speak. You only looked into their eyes with an expression that held sadness, forgiveness, and something deeper they could not name. Then you placed a folded piece of paper into their hand. Before they could open it, they woke. The dream stayed with them all day. They tried to dismiss it as imagination. But that night, while cleaning a drawer they had avoided for months, they found an old note connected to you. It was not the paper from the dream. It did not contain some supernatural answer. Yet seeing it at that exact moment shattered the wall they had built around their feelings. They sat on the floor holding it. And for the first time, they admitted the truth aloud. I still want to see them. Those words changed the atmosphere inside them. Not because speaking them created certainty, but because pretending was no longer possible. The next morning, they searched for tickets. They closed the page. Later, they opened it again. This happened repeatedly until the decision began feeling less like an impulsive act and more like the final step in a long inner journey. Then they bought it. But here is the revelation that makes their fear even more intense. The ticket is not for some distant future. The date is closer than you would imagine. That is why their emotions have become so unsettled. That is why they have been distant with others. That is why ordinary responsibilities suddenly feel difficult. Every passing hour brings the journey closer, and every hour forces them to confront the same question. Will I tell them before I leave, or will I arrive without warning? They have considered both possibilities. Part of them wants to send you a message tonight. Something simple. Something that does not reveal too much. I may be near you soon. But even those words feel too exposed. Another part of them wants to say nothing until they arrive. They imagine standing near a familiar place, taking one photograph, and sending it to you without explanation. They picture you recognizing the location immediately. They imagine your eyes widening as the truth settles in. Yet that idea also frightens them. They do not want you to feel pressured. They do not want their arrival to become an invasion of your peace. They do not want to appear as though they are demanding a place in a life that may have already moved forward. So they remain silent. This silence is not indifference. It is not a game. It is not a lack of intention. It is fear wearing the clothing of caution. They keep opening your conversation. They scroll through old messages, stopping at sentences that once seemed ordinary. A joke. A kind word. A small expression of concern. A moment when you encouraged them without knowing how desperately they needed encouragement. They notice things now that they overlooked before. They notice how often you made room for their emotions while hiding your own. They notice how patiently you waited for clarity. They notice how many times you offered warmth without receiving equal honesty. And the realization hurts them. Not because they believe they are beyond forgiveness, but because they finally understand the weight you carried in silence. They once assumed you would always be there. Not because they did not value you, but because your presence felt so natural that they mistook it for something guaranteed. Your kindness became familiar. Your understanding became a shelter they entered without considering what it cost you to keep the door open. Now they understand. A shelter can become empty when the one maintaining it finally becomes tired. That understanding is one reason they bought the ticket. They are not coming only because they miss you. They are coming because they want to take responsibility for what remained unsaid. They have rehearsed an apology more times than you know. Sometimes they imagine speaking it clearly. Other times, the words collapse inside them. They want to say, "I am sorry I made you question your importance." They want to say, "I was not silent because you meant nothing. I was silent because you meant more than I knew how to handle." They want to say, "I kept waiting to become fearless, and I almost lost you while waiting." But the sentence they fear speaking most is the simplest one. "I still love you." Those 4 words have lived behind their lips for longer than they will admit. They have nearly said them to others while talking about you. They have almost written them in messages that never reached you. They have whispered them alone, believing that silence was the only safe place for such honesty. Now those words are traveling with them. They are inside the ticket. Inside the packed bag they have not fully prepared. Inside the list of things they keep pretending are ordinary. Something huge is waiting for you in this story, because their journey is not being driven by romance alone. There is another reason they feel urgency. Recently, they learned something about time. Not a frightening prediction. Not a tragedy. Not something meant to create fear. It was simply a reminder that opportunities do not remain open forever. Someone close to them spoke about a regret they had carried for years. This person described loving someone deeply but never expressing it. They waited for the perfect moment. They waited for circumstances to become easier. They waited until fear disappeared. The perfect moment never arrived. Life moved forward. The person they loved created a different future. And the confession remained trapped inside a past that could no longer be changed. As your soulmate listened, they felt as though every sentence was directed at them. The person speaking did not know about you. They did not know about the ticket. They did not know about the nights your soulmate spent staring at your name. Yet they said one sentence that became impossible to forget. Sometimes the greatest heartbreak is not rejection. It is never discovering what might have happened. That sentence followed your soulmate home. It stayed with them while they washed their face. It remained while they turned off the lights. It echoed when they woke in the middle of the night. By morning, they knew they could not keep living between longing and avoidance. That was the day they stopped searching for reasons not to come. Yet after purchasing the ticket, another twist emerged. They discovered that someone else may be interested in you. They do not know whether it is true. They do not know whether you have opened your heart to another person. They only heard a fragment of information, vague enough to create doubt but strong enough to awaken jealousy they did not expect. At first, they told themselves they had no right to react. After all, they had remained silent. They had allowed distance to grow. They had given you every reason to believe they would never take a step toward you. But emotions rarely obey logic. The possibility of another person standing where they wished to stand struck them with unexpected force. Suddenly, the ticket felt even more urgent. Then guilt followed. They questioned whether coming to see you was an act of love or an attempt to interrupt your healing. They wondered whether they were arriving because they had finally become brave, or because the thought of losing you to someone else had made delay unbearable. They examined their heart honestly. The answer humbled them. Jealousy may have awakened the urgency, but it did not create the love. The love had been there all along. Hidden. Denied. Delayed. But present. They realized that even if you had chosen another path, they still owed you honesty. Not to pressure you. Not to compete. Not to demand an answer. But to release both of you from the prison of uncertainty. They want you to know what was true.